The wandering Echo drifted through the void between stars, its hull scarred by micrometeorites and decades of deep space exploration. Captain Veltar Crickson adjusted the neural interface connecting her consciousness to the ship's sensors, feeling the familiar tingle as her awareness expanded beyond her organic form. The small scout ship had been mapping the outer rim territories for 3 standard cycles, documenting resource-rich systems for potential colonization. Anomalous energy signature. Detected, announced Nexus, the ship's artificial intelligence. Origin unknown. Recommend investigation. Crickson's elongated fingers danced across the holographic controls, her species' natural electromagnetic sensitivity allowing her to interface directly with the ship's systems. The readings were unlike anything in the Confederation's databases, structured, purposeful yet alien in a way that made her scales ripple with unease. Set course for the source, she commanded, her voice carrying the harmonic undertones that marked her as one of the Velkari, the Confederation's premier scout caste. 3 hours later, the wandering Echo dropped out of hyperspace near a small blue-green world orbiting a yellow star. The energy signature emanated from the planet's surface, not from orbit, not from the gas giant's moons, but from the world itself. Primitive, yet somehow sophisticated. Scanning for life signs, Nexus reported. Detecting approximately 8 billion individual organisms. Preliminary analysis suggests early industrial civilization. Technology level, approximately Category 3 on the galactic development scale. Crickson's throat sacs inflated with surprise. Category 3 civilizations were rare, often unstable, and almost always self-destructive. Most species that achieved industrial technology either transcended to join the galactic community or annihilated themselves within a few hundred cycles. Deploy passive observation protocols, she ordered. Full spectrum analysis. I want to know everything about these beings before we make contact. The data streams flowed through her enhanced consciousness. The dominant species, they called themselves humans, were bipedal, carbon-based, with remarkable adaptability. They had spread across their entire planet, from frozen poles to scorching deserts. Their technology was crude but ingenious, their societies fractured yet capable of remarkable cooperation. But it was their psychology that made Crickson's blood run cold. The humans were warriors, not in the ceremonial sense that most species understood warfare, but in a fundamental, evolutionary way. Their entire development had been shaped by conflict, competition, and an almost pathological drive to overcome any obstacle. They had weapons, capable of sterilizing their entire world, yet somehow maintained enough restraint not to use them. Nexus, compile a preliminary contact assessment, Crickson ordered, her voice tight with concern. Analysis complete. Recommendation: extreme caution, advised. This species exhibits unprecedented levels of aggression coupled with rapid technological advancement. Suggest consultation with Confederation Command before initiating contact protocols. But Crickson was a scout, trained to make first contact with unknown species. Her duty was clear, even if her instincts screamed warnings. She selected a remote location on the planet's surface, a sparsely populated area far from major population centers, and began the approach sequence. The wandering Echo descended through the atmosphere, its stealth systems engaged. Crickson had made first contact with dozens of species over her career. Most were curious, some fearful, a few hostile. But as she prepared to meet humanity for the first time, she couldn't shake the feeling that this encounter would be different. She had no idea how right she was or how catastrophically wrong everything was about to go. The landing site Crickson chose was a windswept plateau in what the humans called Montana, far from their major cities. The wandering Echo touched down with barely a whisper, its anti-gravity systems cushioning the descent. Through the ship's sensors, she observed the alien landscape, vast grasslands stretching to distant mountains, a sky painted in unfamiliar shades of blue. "Initiating contact protocols," she announced to Nexus, "broadcasting standard greeting on multiple frequencies." The response came faster than expected. Within minutes, primitive aircraft appeared on the horizon, jet-powered vehicles. That reminded Crixon of the early atmospheric craft her own people had used millennia ago. They circled at a respectful distance, neither approaching nor fleeing. Then came the ground vehicles, dozens of them, moving with military precision across the grassland. Crixon's sensors identified armed humans emerging from the vehicles, but they maintained defensive positions rather than advancing aggressively. "Fascinating," she murmured. "They're treating this as a potential threat, but they're not attacking. Disciplined." A new signal reached her ship. Radio communications in the dominant human language. Nexus quickly decoded the transmissions. "This is Colonel Maxim Reckwald, United States Air Force. Unknown craft. You are in American airspace. Please identify yourself and state your intentions." Crixon activated the universal translator and opened a communication channel. "Greetings, Colonel Reckwald. I am Captain Veltar Crixon of the Galactic Confederation vessel Wandering Echo. I come in peace, seeking dialogue between our peoples." The silence that followed lasted exactly 47 seconds. When Reckwald's voice returned, it carried a different quality, carefully controlled, professional, but with an underlying tension that Crixon's empathic abilities detected immediately. "Captain Crixon, this is unprecedented. We're going to need you to remain in your current position while we contact our superiors. Can you confirm you're not hostile?" "I confirm peaceful intentions, Colonel. I seek only to establish diplomatic relations between humanity and the Galactic Confederation." What Crixon didn't realize was that her words had just triggered the most massive intelligence operation in human history. Within hours, every major government on Earth knew about the alien contact. Within days, the world's most brilliant minds were analyzing every second of recorded communication, every sensor reading, every pixel of imagery from the encounter. The humans, Crixon discovered, were nothing if not thorough. They sent linguists, scientists, diplomats, and military observers. The initial conversations were formal, cautious, but gradually warmed as both sides shared basic information about their respective civilizations. Crixon found herself genuinely impressed by human curiosity and adaptability. They asked probing questions about galactic society, technology, and the prospect of joining the interstellar community. She explained the Confederation's structure, a loose alliance of over 2,000 species, governed by the principle of mutual benefit and non-interference. "Your species shows remarkable promise," she told the assembled human delegation on the third day. "The Confederation would welcome humanity as a member, though there are certain prerequisites." President Elizaveta Karansk, the lead human negotiator, leaned forward. "What kind of prerequisites?" "Standard galactic law requires new members to demonstrate technological and social maturity. Your species would need to abandon primitive practices, specifically territorial conflicts and resource competition. The Confederation provides for all member species' needs through advanced technology and resource sharing." The humans exchanged glances. "You mean we'd have to give up national sovereignty?" asked Dr. Ravesh Nair, the chief scientist. "Not sovereignty over your own world," Crixon clarified, "but participation in interstellar affairs requires unity. No member species can represent multiple governments or compete internally for galactic resources." What she didn't notice was the way the humans' expressions changed. The subtle shift in posture, the micro-expressions that her alien psychology couldn't fully interpret. To Crixon, they appeared to be considering her words carefully. In reality, every human in that room had reached the same terrible conclusion. The Galactic Confederation was a trap a system designed to strip away everything that made humanity human, their independence, their competitive drive, their right to determine their own destiny. "We'll need time to consider this," President Kerensky said finally. "It's a significant decision for our entire species." "Of course," Crichton replied, completely missing the steel beneath the diplomatic words. "Take all the time you need. The Confederation has waited millennia to meet you. We can wait a little longer." She had no idea that humanity's answer was already being prepared, not in words, but in weapons. While Crichton waited for humanity's official response, Earth's secret, preparations accelerated beyond anything the galaxy had ever witnessed. In hidden facilities across the globe, human scientists worked with desperate efficiency to reverse engineer every scrap of information they could gather about Confederation technology. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Dr. Yuki Tanemon, a quantum physicist working at the Cheyenne Mountain Complex, discovered something that changed everything. The Wandering Echo's communication systems operated on quantum entanglement principles, instantaneous communication across any distance. But the human-intercepted signals revealed far more than Crichton realized. It's not just communication. Tanemon explained to the emergency session of the Global Defense Council. Every Confederation ship is connected to a central network. They're not just sharing data, they're sharing control. The entire Confederation operates as a single, unified entity. General Orrin Blackmar, chairman of the Joint Chiefs, leaned forward. "You're saying they're a hive mind?" "Not exactly," Tanemon replied, her face pale with the implications. "It's worse. They're a bureaucracy. Every decision, every action, every thought is filtered through layers of galactic administration. Individual species exist, but only as components in a vast machine." The revelation sent shockwaves through the human leadership. They had been debating whether to accept Confederation membership, but now they understood the true nature of what they faced. The galaxy wasn't a collection of free peoples. It was a totalitarian state dressed up as a cooperative federation. President Kerensky called for an immediate strategy session. "Options? We could refuse and hope they leave us alone," suggested Secretary of State Elena Vasquez. "They won't," replied CIA Director Marcus Stone. "Our analysis of their communication patterns shows they're already planning integration assistance for humanity. They've done this before, hundreds of times. Any species that refuses membership gets the same treatment: economic sanctions, technological suppression, and eventual forced compliance." "What about negotiation?" asked European Union. Representative Klaus Hoffmann. Stone's expression was grim. "The Confederation doesn't negotiate. They assimilate. Look at the historical data Crichton shared. Every member species followed the same pattern: first contact, membership offer, acceptance, integration, and then nothing. No independent development, no cultural evolution, no technological advancement beyond what the Confederation permits." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. They were facing a choice between submission and annihilation. "There is another option," said General Blackmar quietly. "We've been analyzing their ship, their technology, their communication networks. They're advanced, yes, but they're not invincible. They've grown complacent, dependent on their collective systems. They haven't faced real opposition in millennia." "You're talking about war," President Kerensky said. "I'm talking about survival," Blackmar replied. "If we're going to fight, we need to strike first, fast, and with everything we have. The moment Crichton reports back to her superiors, they'll know we're a threat. We'll lose the element of surprise." Dr. Nair, who had been silent throughout the discussion, finally spoke. "There's something else. Crichton's ship. It's not just a scout vessel. It's a node in their communication network. Every piece of data it collects, every conversation it has, gets transmitted instantly to the Confederation command structure." Meaning, they already know about us. They know our capabilities, our psychology, our strengths and weaknesses. They're not just studying us, they're preparing to control us. The weight of that revelation settled over the room like a shroud. They had thought they were conducting diplomatic negotiations, but they had actually been under examination by a galactic predator. Outside, Crixon continued her observations, completely unaware that her every report was bringing humanity closer to a decision that would reshape the galaxy. She had grown fond of the humans during her stay, impressed by their creativity and resilience. In her private logs, she noted their potential for great contributions to galactic civilization. She never suspected that the humans had been studying her just as intently, learning not just about her technology, but about the fundamental weaknesses of a society that had forgotten how to fight. The decision, when it came, was unanimous. Humanity would not go quietly into the Confederation's embrace. They would go to war instead, not just against one alien scout, but against an entire galaxy, and they would win. 3 weeks after first contact, Captain Crixon received a message that filled her with satisfaction. President Koransk had requested a formal meeting to discuss humanity's decision regarding Confederation membership. The location was to be the United Nations headquarters in New York, a symbolic gesture that Crixon interpreted as humanity's commitment to unity. What she didn't know was that the real preparation was happening thousands of miles away, in facilities that didn't exist on any official maps. Deep beneath the Nevada desert, Project Prometheus had been running continuously for 18 days. The world's greatest minds had reverse-engineered Confederation technology with a speed that would have terrified any galactic observer. Humanity's greatest strength, their adaptability and ingenuity under pressure, was being demonstrated on a scale never before witnessed. Dr. Tanneman stood before a massive holographic display showing the galaxy's communication network. "We've mapped the entire Confederation infrastructure," she announced to the assembled team. "Every major world, every fleet concentration, every command center. They're all connected through quantum entanglement nodes, exactly like the one on Crixon's ship." "How do we use that against them?" asked Admiral Sarah Chen, newly appointed commander of Earth's hastily assembled Space Force. "We turn their greatest strength into their greatest weakness," Tanneman replied. "The same network that gives them instantaneous communication across the galaxy can carry other things: viruses, weapon systems, destructive algorithms." General Blackmar studied the display. "You're talking about using their own network to attack them?" "More than that," Tanneman said, her eyes gleaming with dangerous possibility. "We're talking about using their network to replace them. Every Confederation ship, every orbital station, every planetary defense grid, they're all vulnerable to the same exploit. If we can get the right code into their system, we can take control of their entire military," Admiral Chen finished. "Turn their own weapons against them." But the quantum virus was only part of humanity's preparation. In orbital shipyards that hadn't existed a month ago, construction crews worked around the clock building humanity's first true warships. The designs were revolutionary, not copies of Confederation technology, but improvements upon it. Where the aliens had built their ships for efficiency and standardization, humans built for war. The Retribution-class battleships were monsters of metal and plasma, designed with one purpose: to kill anything that threatened Earth. Their weapons systems combined human ingenuity with alien technology, creating something the galaxy had never seen. Weapons that could think, adapt, and learn from their targets. Dr. Ravesh Nair oversaw the Psychological Warfare Division, developing techniques specifically designed to exploit Confederation weaknesses. "They've been peaceful for so long, they've forgotten what fear feels like," he explained to his team. "We're going to remind them." Meanwhile, Captain Crixon prepared for what she believed would be humanity's formal acceptance into galactic civilization. She had grown genuinely fond of the humans during her extended stay, impressed by their rapid technological advancement and social adaptability. In her reports to Confederation Command, she praised their potential contributions to galactic society. Her superiors agreed. Fleet Admiral Gorvac himself had expressed interest in humanity's integration, noting their unusual combination of technological aptitude and social cohesion. Plans were already underway to establish a Confederation administrative center in Earth's solar system, complete with the standard integration protocols used on hundreds of other worlds. Neither Crixon nor her superiors suspected that every communication they sent was being intercepted, decoded, and analyzed by human intelligence services. Earth's leaders knew exactly what the Confederation had planned for humanity. The same fate that had befallen every other species that had dared to develop independent civilization. President Koransk stood before the assembled world leaders in the secure briefing room beneath the UN building. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have 72 hours before the formal ceremony. Our ships are in position, our weapons are armed, and our target list is complete. Once we begin, there will be no turning back." "What about civilian casualties?" asked the German Chancellor. "The Confederation doesn't have civilians," replied CIA Director Stone. "Their entire society is militarized, controlled by the same administrative systems we're targeting. Every alien world that falls under their control becomes a resource extraction site staffed by willing slaves." "And if we fail?" asked the Japanese Prime Minister. President Koransk's expression was grim. "Then humanity dies as a free species, and Earth becomes another Confederation colony. But we won't fail. We can't afford to." Above them, Captain Crixon made final preparations for the ceremony that would welcome humanity into galactic civilization. She had no idea she was about to witness the most devastating military campaign in galactic history, or that it would begin with her own ship's destruction. The countdown to humanity's war for survival had begun. The formal ceremony was scheduled for 1400 hours GMT. Representatives from every major nation had gathered at the United Nations headquarters, while millions watched the historic moment on global television. Captain Crixon stood at the podium, her iridescent scales catching the light as she prepared to welcome humanity into the Galactic Confederation. "Today marks the beginning of a new age," she announced, her words translated into dozens of human languages. "Your species will join our community of enlightened civilizations, sharing in the peace and prosperity that has characterized our galaxy for millennia." President Koransk stepped forward, carrying an ornate document that appeared to be humanity's formal acceptance of Confederation membership. The cameras captured every moment as she approached the podium, the supposed culmination of humanity's evolution from a primitive, warlike species to enlightened galactic citizens. "Captain Crixon," President Koransk said, her voice carrying to every corner of the Earth, "humanity has made its decision." At exactly 1401 hours GMT, as Crixon reached for the document, President Koransk spoke 4 words that changed galactic history forever. "We choose to fight." The quantum virus struck instantly. In the millisecond it took for Crixon to process the human's words. The malicious code propagated through the Confederation's quantum communication network at the speed of thought. Every ship, every station, every planetary defense grid connected to the network suddenly found its systems infiltrated by an alien intelligence, human artificial intelligence, specifically designed to turn the galaxy's own weapons against itself. The Wandering Echo was the first to die. The ship's systems turned against themselves, overloading power cores and breaching containment fields. Crixon had just enough time to realize what was happening before her vessel became a brief, brilliant star above the United Nations building. But that was only the beginning. Across the galaxy, Confederation Fleet Admiral Gorvac was reviewing deployment. Orders when every screen in his command center suddenly displayed the same message in perfect galactic standard. "Humanity sends its regards." The orbital fortress, eternal vigilance. Pride of the Confederation fleet. turned its own antimatter. Cannons inward and fired. The destruction was instantaneous and absolute. 3 million years of galactic civilization died in the first 60 seconds of humanity's war. On Xerion Prime, the Confederation's administrative capital, massive orbital platforms designed to protect the world instead began bombarding the surface. The planet's 12 billion inhabitants had no time to understand what was happening before their world cracked apart under the assault. In the Andromeda sector, a Confederation battle fleet conducting routine patrols suddenly found their ships turning on each other. Admiral Tezcala, a veteran of the Confederation's last military action 3,000 years ago, watched in horror as her flagship destroyed her own escort vessels before targeting the heavily populated trade worlds below. The human virus was elegant in its simplicity. It didn't need to fight the Confederation systems. It became those systems. Every weapon, every defense, every safeguard that had protected galactic civilization for millennia now served humanity's war machine. The galaxy's own strength had become its doom. Dr. Tanneman watched the destruction unfold from the command center beneath Cheyenne Mountain. Holographic displays showed the cascade of destruction spreading across the galaxy at light speed, the virus moving through quantum channels while the physical destruction followed at a more leisurely pace. "Status report," ordered General BlackHFY. 63% of Confederation military assets have been compromised and turned, Tanneman reported. "We're detecting massive energy signatures from their core worlds. Looks like we're getting secondary explosions as their power grids overload." "What about their civilian populations?" Admiral Chen's expression was grim. "There aren't any. Not in the way we understand civilians." The Confederation's psychological profiles were accurate. Every adult member of their society is part of the administrative military complex. They eliminated independent thought 3 millennia ago. On the screens, entire star systems went dark. The Velkari homeworld, Crixon's species, lasted exactly 14 minutes before its planetary defense grid cracked the planet's crust. The artistic archives of the Zephyrian culture, poetry and music spanning 50,000 years, vanished in nuclear fire as automated systems turned cultural preservation centers into weapons. President Karansk watched the destruction with a mixture of satisfaction and horror. "How long until we've eliminated their ability to retaliate?" "At current rates, complete military collapse within 6 hours, reported General BlackHFY. "But we should prepare for long-term occupation. Some systems will require direct human intervention to fully secure." What they were witnessing was the complete collapse of galactic civilization, not through conquest, but through the weaponization of the very cooperation and unity that the Confederation had demanded from every member species. The galaxy had become so interdependent, so centralized, that striking at its heart had caused total systemic failure. The humans had done something unprecedented in galactic history. They had fought a war against an entire galaxy and won it in a single day. But as the celebrations began on Earth, none of them fully understood what they had just become. The inheritors of 3 million years of accumulated knowledge, technology, and responsibility. The easy part was over. Now came the hard part. Ruling the galaxy they had just conquered. 6 months after what historians would call the 40-minute war, Admiral Chen stood on the bridge of the Prometheus, humanity's first interstellar command ship, surveying the wreckage of the Confederation capital system, where once the jewel of galactic civilization had sparkled with the light of billions of souls. Now only debris fields and cooling plasma marked the graves of entire worlds. "Final casualty reports, Admiral," announced Commander Yuki Tannemon, formerly Dr. Tannemon before her recruitment into the newly formed Human Galactic Navy. "Confederation military losses, 100%, civilian casualties." She paused, her face grim. Difficult to calculate. The Confederation didn't distinguish between military and civilian populations the way we do. Chen nodded, studying the tactical displays. The numbers were staggering. Over 3 trillion sentient beings had died in the first wave of attacks. Entire species had been extinguished in minutes as their own defensive systems turned against them. The scale of destruction was beyond anything in recorded galactic history. "What about survivors?" Chen asked. "Scattered populations on fringe worlds that weren't fully integrated into their network," Tanneman replied. "Maybe a few billion individuals across the entire galaxy. Most are in primitive agricultural communities or industrial colonies that operated independently." The bridge's main screen flickered to life, showing President Karansk's face from the new command center on Luna. The decision to move Earth's government off-world had been made within days of the victory, a precaution against potential retaliation. That never came. Admiral Chen, status report on the occupied sectors. "Proceeding as planned, Madam President. We've established human administrative centers in 47 key systems. Resistance has been minimal. Most survivors seem to view us as liberators rather than conquerors." It was true, and it was perhaps the most disturbing aspect of humanity's galactic conquest. The few Confederation survivors they encountered didn't fight back. They couldn't. 3 millennia of administrative conditioning had bred the capacity for independent action out of most galactic species. They waited for orders from their new human masters with the same passive compliance they had shown their former overlords. Dr. Nayer's psychological assessment teams had confirmed humanity's worst fears about the Confederation. The galaxy had been a prison disguised as a paradise, where independent thought was gradually eliminated through social conditioning and technological dependence. The billions who died in the initial attack had been slaves who had forgotten they were enslaved. "What about the knowledge archives?" President Karansk asked. "That's the one piece of good news," Chen replied. "Most of the scientific and cultural data was stored in quantum crystalline matrices that survived the attacks. We're looking at the accumulated knowledge of thousands of civilizations spanning millions of years. Our science teams are having trouble even cataloging it all." The irony wasn't lost on any of them. In destroying the Confederation, humanity had inherited the greatest treasure trove of knowledge in galactic history. Technologies that could reshape matter at the atomic level, energy sources that could power entire star systems, medical techniques that could extend human life for millennia. All of it now belonged to the species that had destroyed its creators. But with great power came terrible responsibility. Reports were flooding in from human occupation forces across the galaxy, and the picture they painted was deeply troubling. On Velkari Prime, the survivors were slowly starving because they had forgotten how to grow food without administrative oversight. The Zephyrian colonies had devolved into chaos because their entire social structure had been dependent on Confederation guidance. "Madam President," Chen said carefully, "we need to discuss the long-term situation. We're not just occupying these worlds, we're keeping them alive. Without human intervention, most of these populations will die within a generation." The weight of that statement settled over the conversation. Humanity had gone to war to preserve their independence, but victory had made them responsible for the fate of an entire galaxy. They had become the very thing they had fought to avoid, the administrators of a galactic empire. "Options?" Karansk asked. 3, Chen replied. "We can withdraw and let natural selection sort out the survivors. We can maintain the occupation indefinitely, essentially becoming the new Confederation. Or, we can try to teach them to be free again. It'll take generations, maybe centuries, but it's possible to reverse the conditioning. Help them remember what it means to be independent civilizations." President Karansk was quiet for a long moment, considering the implications. Each option carried enormous moral weight. Withdrawal meant genocide through neglect. Occupation meant becoming the tyrants they had overthrown. Rehabilitation meant committing humanity to a multi-generational project of unprecedented scope. "There's a 4th option," she said finally. We can make sure this never happens again. We can build something new, not a confederation or an empire, but a true alliance of independent species, a galaxy where freedom and cooperation coexist. It was an ambitious vision, perhaps impossibly so. But as Admiral Chen looked out at the stars that now answered to human authority, she found herself hoping that humanity was up to the challenge. They had proven they could destroy a galactic civilization in 40 minutes. Now they had to prove they could build something better. 5 years after the 40-minute war, the galaxy bore little resemblance to the sterile administrative paradise the Confederation had maintained. From the observation deck of the human-built station New Horizon, Ambassador Elena Vasquez watched the first joint human-alien exploration fleet depart for the unexplored regions beyond the galactic rim. The fleet was a marvel of cooperative engineering. Human warships flew alongside rebuilt vessels crewed by former Confederation species, their designs modified to emphasize exploration rather than control. The lead ship, the Independence, carried a mixed crew of humans and aliens working together as equals, something that would have been impossible under the old regime. "The Velkari delegation has arrived," announced her aide, Commander Marcus Stone, Jr., son of the former CIA director. The younger Stone had volunteered for the diplomatic corps, believing that humanity's future lay in building rather than destroying. Ambassador Vasquez turned to greet the arriving delegation. Leading them was Kextar Vailson, one of the few surviving members of Captain Crixon's species. Unlike his predecessor, Vailson had adapted to the new galactic order with remarkable ease, becoming one of the most effective advocates for interspecies cooperation. "Ambassador," Vailson said, his translator rendering his complex harmonics into clear English. "The Velkari Republic formally accepts humanity's proposal for the Galactic Freedom Accord." It was the moment Vasquez had been working toward for 3 years. The accord represented humanity's vision for the galaxy's future, a loose alliance of independent civilizations committed to mutual aid and defense, but without the centralized control that had doomed the Confederation. "That makes 47 member civilizations," Stone observed quietly. "More than half the surviving populations in the galaxy." The achievement was remarkable, but it had come at enormous cost. The rehabilitation programs had been only partially successful. Some species, like the Velkari, had adapted to freedom with enthusiasm. Others remained dependent on human guidance, unable to make the psychological transition from subjects to citizens. A few had rejected freedom entirely, choosing extinction rather than independence. Dr. Yuki Tanemon, now Director of Galactic Reconstruction, entered the observation deck carrying a data pad. "The quarterly reports are in," she announced. "Population recovery is ahead of projections in most sectors. We're seeing genuine technological innovation for the first time in millennia." "Any word from the deep exploration teams?" Vasquez asked. Tanemon's expression grew serious. "That's the interesting news. Long-range sensors have detected artificial structures in the galactic halo. Massive constructs that predate the Confederation by millions of years. We may not have been the first species to challenge galactic hegemony." The implications were staggering. If other civilizations had fought against the Confederation's predecessors, what had become of them? Were humanity's new responsibilities even greater than they had imagined? President Karansk's voice echoed through the station's communication system. "Attention all personnel. We're receiving a transmission from the exploration fleet. They've made contact." The main display activated, showing the bridge of the Independence. Captain Maria Santos, humanity's first alien-human joint fleet commander, appeared on screen alongside her Velkari co-captain. "Madam President, we've encountered a civilization that predates the Confederation," Santos reported. "They call themselves the Architects, and they've been watching the galaxy for over 10 million years. A new figure appeared on screen, tall, crystalline, utterly alien, yet somehow familiar. When it spoke, its words carried the weight of eons. "Greetings, young conquerors. We are the last of those who built the galaxy's first great civilization. We witnessed the rise of the Confederation, just as we witnessed the rise of the hegemony before it, and the empire before that. Each time, we hoped that the cycle might be broken. President Karansk leaned forward. What cycle? The cycle of unity and tyranny, rebellion and destruction. For 10 million years, the galaxy has alternated between periods of centralized control and chaotic freedom. The Confederation was merely the latest iteration of an ancient pattern. Ambassador Vasquez felt a chill run down her spine. Are you saying we've just repeated history? Not repeated, the architect replied. Transcended. You are the first species to destroy a galactic empire and then choose to build something better, rather than simply replacing it. The first to understand that true civilization requires both freedom and responsibility. The revelation hung in the air like a benediction. Humanity had not just won a war, they had broken a cycle that had trapped the galaxy for millions of years. We offer you a gift, the architect continued. The knowledge of those who came before, the mistakes of previous cycles, and the wisdom to avoid them. But the choice of what to build remains yours. As the transmission ended, Ambassador Vasquez looked out at the stars with new understanding. Humanity had sought only to preserve their own freedom, but in doing so, they had freed an entire galaxy from a prison of its own making. The responsibility was overwhelming, but so was the opportunity. The age of empires was over. The age of freedom had begun. And in the vast darkness between the stars, ancient watchers smiled and prepared to sleep at last, knowing that the galaxy was finally in worthy hands.